Brian, recently promoted to shift foreman, was excited about his new night shift schedule, which let him attend his son's school events without work conflicts. During a few days off, he worked on converting the garage apartment into a quiet daytime retreat, while setting up internet access by running a cable and installing a Wi-Fi extender in the attic. He heard strange noises from the house. Brenda, his wife, was supposed to be at work, and their son, Tim, was visiting her parents. Suspicious, Brian secretly recorded what he discovered and began planning a surprising, long-term revenge. No one should have been home, so curious Brian approached the sound emanating from their bedroom. He found himself over an old air conditioning vent that Brenda had previously complained about, which he had failed to remove after installing a new one. Looking through the vent after shifting some insulation, Brian's heart sunk as he saw Brenda with another man. Shocked and hurt, he couldn't look away for several minutes. Regaining his composure, he pulled out his phone and covertly recorded the scene through the vent. The man then asked, "Does your husband ever satisfy you, or is he lacking?" Brenda objected, but Brian thought her protest sounded weak. He was certain that he was a good lover and excellent father. Yet, she continued to argue, stating, "I'm sure he is." But here she was about to be intimate with another man in his bed, which didn't seem to align with her claims of contentment. Brian wondered why he had let her persuade him into this act right there. Brenda moaned she was about to climax. Bill Grant, the one on top of her, suddenly tensed. They stayed still for a moment before Bill saw himself roll off Brenda. Bill commented on the excitement of taking risks, stating that being intimate in Brenda's place was good, but doing it in her marital bed added an extra level of thrill. Brian, recognizing Bill as Bill Grant, a driver at their shared workplace, had recently divorced and his daughter attended school with Tim. "That sounds risky," said Brenda, expressing little emotion. She suspected Bill's intentions were to outdo Brian by having sex in her marital bed. Bill chuckled softly, agreeing that it was a competition for men, stating he felt victorious being with Brenda in her husband's bed. He found it exhilarating, but would not be as thrilling if Brian discovered them. Grant suggested a deal. "As long as you conceal your husband's ignorance, we won't act out in their bed. However, when he resumes his usual activities, I must reconnect with him to reclaim my position. Yet, I can't sever ties with Brian entirely. He is my spouse. I can't abruptly halt our intimacy. Instead, I will attempt to dissuade him from seeking closeness and restrict our encounters to spaces other than our bedroom. The mere thought of Brian discovering us fills me with dread." Unbeknownst to Brenda, Brian had parked his truck in a secluded garage, away from prying eyes. Overwhelmed by finding out about his wife's infidelity, Brian descended from the attic in a daze. He chose to forego confronting Brenda and instead prioritized their son Tim, who was still in high school. His emotions towards Brenda no longer held any weight. Deterred from allowing the cheater to enjoy the house he had spent 15 years renovating, Brian decided to remain there until Tim graduated. He sped up his apartment above the garage's renovation, intending to make it a livable space with a kitchen and bathroom for himself. He aimed to focus on securing Tim's college fund first, then work on rebuilding his own life once that was achieved. By the time Brenda arrived home, Brian was in the kitchen and calmly asked her if something had happened at home. Upon seeing him, she noticed his composure and questioned if he had returned early. As he looked at her now, he recognized signs of aging that had previously gone unnoticed, wondering why he hadn't noticed them before. In retrospect, it struck him that love may have been the cause of his blindness towards those changes. Feeling somber, he acknowledged it was her actions altering their bond. "The work environment is chilly lately. I've been requested to cover some night shifts commencing tonight," they said. "They granted me time during the day to return home, grab a meal, and rest before returning later." Brian clarified the situation. "It doesn't seem right for them to make you work nights after a regular shift, even with some rest time in the middle of the day," he reasoned. Brenda agreed. "You'll be worn out at least. Lie down and nap for a bit," she suggested. Brian consented to this idea. "I guess I'll go take a short nap now." Brenda abruptly spoke up, recalling the state of their bedsheets. I just remembered we need to wash the linens, she exclaimed. Oh, all right, replied Brian, amused by Brenda's discomfort. I'll use the guest room bed instead. Brian didn't head off to work as claimed, but instead opted for a baseball game at a sports bar. Later, he secretly slept on an air mattress in his future apartment. The following day, Brian swiftly engaged a contractor, eager to begin work right away. This was unusual since Brian typically worked from Sunday nights through Thursday, leaving weekends free. It perplexed Brenda to find him arranging to sleep in the guest room on a Friday, his usual night off. Brenda questioned, "Why are you sleeping in the guest room when we hardly see each other during your night shifts? Why not share our bed?" She was puzzled since he had worked the previous night and caught some rest that morning while she was at work. However, he wasn't tired. He intended to watch a baseball game followed by a movie, Brian clarified, sticking to his premeditated explanation. He aimed to acclimate himself to staying awake at night and sleeping during the day. You needn't disrupt your slumber unless you're inclined for some activity, which Brian proposed by raising his eyebrows suggestively. However, if you hadn't overheard your conversation with your partner, you might have missed the fleeting deer in the headlights expression followed by a feeble smile from you. I must confess, I'm quite weary tonight. Perhaps we could simply cuddle and retire for the night. You suggested as much, but given that Tim is home, there's the possibility he might hear us. Cuddling isn't sufficient for me, you pointed out. If intimacy isn't on the table, I'll opt for the guest room to resist temptation, a move I've never considered necessary in our past. You're correct, I didn't concern myself with Tim hearing us before, so this appears to be an excuse. There's no need for you to fabricate stories. I'm not the type to coerce women, as you well know. You're right, it was a weak pretext, and I apologize. I'm simply tired and uninspired in matters of romance. I hope you comprehend my stance. Brenda tendered her apologies. I understand more than you might suppose. Please inform me when you're receptive if I should feel similarly. Sunday evening, goodnight, Brian departed towards the guest room, leaving Brenda with a puzzled look as he commenced his new position as shift foreman without disclosing his promotion to her due to her reticence. His shift progressed harmoniously, greeted by an accommodating team by the break of Monday morning. By then, Brenda was at work and construction on Brian's apartment was underway. After a brief conversation with the foreman, Brian dozed off, despite the disturbances from noise and occasional phone calls. Forgetting to mute the landline in the guest room, he groggily responded to a call. "Hello, sorry to wake you up," Brian said, recognizing his mother-in-law Beverly on the other end. "I wanted to inform you that Bill and I found out about your night shifts, and will ensure not to disturb you should you require assistance with Tim during sleep hours. Just reach out to us if needed." Brian ended the conversation without saying a word, expressing disbelief at people's lack of awareness as he disconnected the phone and fell back asleep. The construction team completed their work in under a week, impressing Brian with their efficiency. Contemplating how long it would take him to accomplish the same task, he marveled at their speed. On Friday afternoon, he went to a furniture store to order essentials for his new space, a king-sized bed, a small kitchen table with 4 chairs, and a compact sofa. He also visited an appliance store to choose a large flat-screen TV, fridge, oven, and microwave. By Monday afternoon, his bachelor pad would be ready for him to move in fully. Brian chuckled when he saw Brenda's bewildered expression upon returning home on Monday, finding a crew working around their detached garage. He explained that he was finishing an apartment over the garage, as he needed a quiet space to sleep during the day without disruptions. The apartment would be soundproofed and wouldn't even have a landline since he works nights. He reasoned that it would be simpler for everyone if he had his own space. Brenda expressed her surprise at not knowing about his plans, but reminded him of their family connection. "You should realize I'm present. I'll attend Tim's baseball events, and we'll dine together as planned," Brian assured her. "But recall our conversation a few days back regarding some exclusive time. Are you suggesting that tonight? You're behaving as if marriage is only about intimacy. It involves communication, romance, and sharing issues. It's not solely about physical connection, understand me? Don't preach to me about marriage," Brian cautioned. I invest in this union just like you, and it will function smoothly. Just let me know when you want me in our bed. I'm not a mere object for your convenience, asserted Brenda. You won't receive anything until you offer a genuine apology, and I expect a romantic dinner out as part of that apology. Brian smiled and departed, leaving Brenda perplexed. While she aimed to keep Bill Grant at bay, Brenda was concerned about Brian's actions. Brian appeared different, seemingly disregarding her, which alarmed her. He had previously been attentive before deciding on a special night for Brian. Once he apologized, Brenda was confident that they wouldn't be without intimacy much longer. She knew his interest in it wouldn't wane. By the next Wednesday, Brian was comfortably settled into his new apartment, with Labor Day weekend approaching. He had 3 nights off before Tim's junior year started on the following Tuesday. At dinner on Thursday, Brian proposed a plan. Would you both like to go to a Diamondbacks game this weekend? They're playing the Dodgers, and it's a significant series for them. Tim enthusiastically agreed. Thanks, Dad, Tim exclaimed. Brenda expressed her disinterest in baseball. I'll pass on the game and find something else to do at home, she said. Brian made a comment she could hear. I bet you will. The plan was set then. Tim and he would attend the Saturday night game. He didn't act like his usual self, ignoring her, causing concern. Always attentive before, he planned an unforgettable night for Brian. After apologizing, Brenda was certain they wouldn't be without intimacy long. She knew his interest in it wouldn't fade. In his new apartment by Wednesday, Brian was prepared for the upcoming Labor Day weekend with 3 days off before Tim's junior year started. At dinner on Thursday, he suggested a Diamondbacks game against the Dodgers to Brenda and Tim. Tim agreed enthusiastically while Brenda expressed her dislike of baseball. Brian made a comment that Brenda could hear. I bet you will. The plan was set for them to attend the Saturday night game. Tim exclaimed he needed to tell Scooter about something, saying he'd be envious. Scooter is a die-hard Dodger fan and used to reside in Leh. Brian suggested inviting him since watching baseball with friends, particularly fellow fans, adds to the fun. Tim agreed quickly as he hurried to get his phone, appreciating the suggestion. Dad observed that baseball was a great way for Tim to connect with the guys. Scooters seems like a good kid. However, when Brian learned Scooter's real name was Horace, he found it surprising. No wonder he's called Scooter, Tim remarked. Mentioned that Horace's father had passed away due to a brain aneurysm 2 years back. Brenda explained, brushing off Brian's comment about the name. They moved here this summer to be near his grandparents who were struggling. Regardless, Tim will call him Scooter and forget he ever heard Horace was his real name, declared Brian. Tim then announced that Scooter's mom said he could come along excitedly. On a Saturday afternoon, Tim parked his truck outside a well-maintained suburban house. Before he could fully stop, a boy named Scooter dashed out and hopped into the truck alongside Tim. Hi, Mr. Welker, Scooter said. My mom wants to meet you before we go. He explained this to diffuse any potential concerns about him being inappropriate. Scooter apologized for the awkwardness, but Brian reassured him not to worry. Stepping out of the truck, he walked up to the door and rang the bell. A slender woman of similar age to Brian opened the door. Brian couldn't help but admire her toned legs, which were showcased in running shorts. Her flat stomach and fitted top also caught his attention. Do you think my legs look good compared to everything else? Scooter's mom asked playfully. Brian responded, Yes, they look great. Noticing her amused smile, he added, You've got some nice legs. She persisted, asking if it was wise for her son to attend a baseball game with a man who ogles every woman he encounters. Scooter's mom attempted humorously to impart manners in her son. Brian recognized she was teasing, so he played along. In essence, she was inquiring about the wisdom of allowing him to go anywhere with such a man, given that ogling women is part of being a male. Brian jestingly replied, He needs to learn to value women. I'll show him what to look for. Just be more subtle during these teachings, she suggested. The woman maintained her smile and stated the first lesson would be to reprimand anyone who calls him Horace, except you, of course. Brian jokingly responded, indicating that his son will learn assertiveness and appreciate women's attributes. She clarified, "Not just legs," he replied. "I'll teach him to judge discerningly and appreciate all aspects of women." Mom expressed sincere gratitude towards Brian, wishing him enjoyment and requesting a call if he's delayed. Incidentally, her name is Gertrude, but her friends know her as Minx, Raven, or Bubbles. Inquisitive, Brian asks how her friends address her. For male acquaintances, she goes by Minx. Gertrude remains serious and replies that she's Gertrude to Brian. He finds this amusing and decides to call her Minx, appreciating the name. Brian questions why he isn't surprised by this revelation, causing Gertrude to chuckle and then laugh heartily. She mentions that Horace can accompany him anytime, commending his sense of humor. Tim, she says, is polite, suggesting that his parents would approve of the invitation to the game. The family are avid baseball fans, with Gertrude reminiscing about attending as many Dodgers home games as possible, her father even playing in the minor leagues prior to her birth. Despite being talented, he fell short of the professional level, Gertrude notes. Scooter, she adds, is a wonderful kid. No worries, I'll watch over him and ensure he gets home safe and sound, old buddy. Enjoy your day. Did you seriously call me Minx? Gertrude protested. You'll always be Minx to me, Brian retorted as he strolled back to the truck. Brian had a leisurely day at the game. Scooter grabbed a foul ball, and both boys overindulged in hot dogs and soda, leading them to doze off in the truck before Brian could leave the parking lot. Upon reaching Scooter's home, Brian gently roused the sleepy teenager and guided him to the front door where Gertrude awaited with a smile. He may have consumed a bit too much food and soda, Brian admitted. Of course he did. It's part of the ball game, Gertrude replied, expressing gratitude for taking Scooter and safely returning him. It was my pleasure, said Brian. Scooter is a terrific kid. As the day ended, Brian found himself settling into a comfortable routine. After returning home, having a swift breakfast, and dozing off from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. due to additional insulation and dark curtains, his sleep was generally deep and peaceful. This habit of napping during weekends often drew complaints from Brenda regarding Brian's retreat in the man cave, but her protests would subside if he lent a hand around the house. Brian seemed concerned about being spotted by Grant in their bedroom, which implied that she might not be contemplating divorce as part of his strategy to remain married until Tim graduated. With his new role as foreman, managing physically was easier for Brian. He purchased a home gym and consistently exercised. He attended all of Tim's baseball practices and eventually coached some talented but shy children on scooters. With additional coaching from Brian, he turned into a valuable player by midseason. Tim also thrived, making Brian proud. Brian observed some mothers at the games who appreciated his participation, often laughing at his jokes and providing treats some for him as well. The friendship between Tim and the scooter grew, and Brian found himself spending more time with Tim's mom, Gertrude. She was intelligent and quick-witted. He contemplated discussing a sensitive matter with her. "I hope I'm not overstepping here, Gertrude," said Brian hesitantly, "but I have to ask you something." Gertrude responded promptly. "What seems to be the problem, Brian?" Brian confessed, "Well, when a man says he has a personal question, isn't it usually about a woman's bra size?" Gertrude chuckled and replied, "Yes, that's often the case." Laughing along, Brian echoed her response. "Are you sensing some moms acting differently towards you recently and thinking they may have become friendlier?" "You indeed have keen eyes," Gertrude countered. "Seems like you're unaware of the situation, though, doesn't it?" "I need more context to answer that," Brian mused. "Don't confuse this with baseball rules, such as the infield fly rule. I believe you're discussing a different matter. Is that correct?" "Nope. You're referring to the unwritten code of not attempting bunts or steals when holding a substantial lead," Gertrude clarified before getting serious. "If you've been attentive, you would observe that the friendliest moms are single ones. You're a good father, attractive, and well-employed, which makes you an appealing catch to them. What about your marital status? Wouldn't it be relevant?" Brian inquired. They pondered for a moment. Gertrude responded, That's why they haven't made any advances towards you. No one has attempted, right? And no one has tried. Not that it would be an issue, Brian reiterated, as he is married. It's clear I'm not a good catch for anyone, Brian, and I dislike that fact. However, since we're friends, I feel compelled to tell you the truth. Rumors are swirling that your wife is unfaithful, but they escalate as word gets out that she's also denying intimacy in your relationship. You two aren't sharing a bed, and it seems like a breakup is looming on the horizon. Apparently, the women in town are eager to take you under their wing once you're single. Gert's revelation left Brian stunned. He couldn't understand how everyone seemed to know about his private life until he realized that Brenda must have told someone, probably that jerk, about your sleeping arrangement, and they spilled the beans. Brian was furious. When Gert asked if she meant his wife or her bed, it was an attempt to lighten the mood. However, you seemed surprisingly calm amidst all the gossip. Gert questioned if you had any inkling of Brenda's infidelity, to which Brian replied he hadn't suspected a thing. Gert was taken aback, asking incredulously if he ever had any suspicion. Brian clarified that he knew she was cheating, but never guessed it would be him who'd find out. I'm at a loss. It seems Brenda had been hiding it well. How did you figure it out without harboring doubts about Gert? It became clear when I discovered Grant in bed with Brenda. I skipped the suspicion phase, Brian explained. Indeed, you caught them red-handed yet, and you're not behind bars. You're not advocating for open relationships, are you, or some sort of peeping Tom? Not at all, Gert was worried. No, that's not me, Brian assured her. I shifted my priorities, focusing on spending quality time with Tim and being a full-time father. Living with Brenda instead of separating seemed the best way to achieve this. Working nights put a strain on our relationship, but it allowed me to sleep during the day without disturbance. I constructed an apartment over the garage for that very reason. Brenda wasn't pleased with the sleeping arrangement, but Grant made it clear that whenever she slept with me, he would demand our bed for their secret meetings. She found his behavior troubling, yet didn't end their meetings, as she believed their affair remained clandestine. She intended to maintain its secrecy. He chose not to remain close friends with her, having undergone STD testing and wanting to keep his status unchanged. Gertrude expressed displeasure at a situation where someone treated him poorly, mentioning that the man was widely perceived as a jerk. However, he felt underrated in terms of appeal. Gertrude pointed out his physical attractiveness and charming smile. She acknowledged his strength, kindness, intelligence, and ability with children, suggesting that if she were more physically attractive, she might have been interested in him. Brian, however, found this suggestion amusing, given his own looks. Gertrude also highlighted his solid job as potentially appealing to some desperate women. Eventually, Gertrude admitted she hadn't realized everyone was aware of his situation, to which Brian responded with a touch of melancholy. Feeling mortified, I can't even maintain my marriage. Yet, I find myself happy. I feel like a weakling, but you're a strong guy who aspires to be a good father for your son. You've demonstrated enough toughness to navigate through this mess, allowing you to establish a solid connection with Tim, and Horace thinks highly of you. Gertrude affirmed, asking if you were feeling better now that she was teasing you about Horace's name. Gertrude added, smiling, that minx, you're a great friend preventing me from sinking too deeply into my own misery. I merely hope Tim doesn't discover our situation. Brian admitted that the ship has either sailed or is very close to doing so. Gertrude disclosed Horace mentioned that Tim is aware of the turmoil at home. You primarily avoid his mother, and sooner or later, he might pick up on something given how many people are privy to our circumstances. Gertrude commented, sharing her thoughts, that Horace has a crush on Heather Grant. It's uncomfortable for both of us, him and I. She's an innocent girl unaware of her father's obnoxious behavior. I'm merely grateful Tim isn't pursuing Heather. It would be a disaster if he did. Brian commented, and that would have been complicated. I'll take whatever comes my way. Horace claims Tim has his sights set on Holly Ingram, which isn't surprising given her constant presence at every game, cheering him on. Gertrude chimed in with a grin. Yes, I've seen her around. Nice kid. I knew her family growing up. Brian reminisced. 2 nights later, during the district championships, Brian found himself more anxious than Tim. It didn't help that 3 single mothers were showing interest in him. Norma Wilson wore a provocative top, showcasing her ample cleavage. Brandy Dorn leaned forward towards Brian, her curves emphasized by a snug sweater, inquiring about the team. Gertrude was less discreet, pressing against Brian's arm with her chest. Jillian Patterson smirked as she handed him snacks. Brian observed them all suddenly depart, followed by the sound of a familiar voice behind him, his wife joining to watch their son play. She commented loudly about navigating through fans to reach him. When Brenda asked what was happening, Brian attempted to divert the conversation. However, Brenda persisted, questioning why several women had been attracted to him like bees to honey. Good thing he wasn't allergic to silicone if deciphering women was the task at hand. He admitted his confusion and mentioned his surprise to see her present. His son was playing in a significant game, and she was there to offer support. Other mothers are present too, it appears. Some of them seem more intrigued by you than by the game. Brenda inquired if you've been preoccupied lately, which is why you haven't attended games. How did you find the time to show up today? Brian noticed. Brian was curious and glanced at Brenda, perhaps subtly hinting at her responsibilities. However, she brushed off any potential implications. If he suspected anything, he would confront her more directly. Brian wouldn't overlook cheating if he were aware of it. I prioritize Tim's game, thus I value it. We haven't spent much time together since you started the night shift, so I thought it would be enjoyable to spend some time together, cheering for Tim. Brenda clarified her reasons as she settled into the bleachers for the first game. She observed frosty glances from certain other mothers, perplexed since she hadn't interacted with them earlier. However, upon spotting Gertrude, she noticed a casual yet captivating demeanor, complete with well-coiffured hair and shorts. The game commenced, and Brian remained focused on the field. Tim stepped up to bat, hitting a double, followed by Scooter, who seemed more robust than the previous season. Scooter's strike sent the ball soaring over the fence, causing an outburst of cheers as he and Tim completed their rounds. Gertrude took pride in her son's accomplishment, while Brian, moved by the boy's success, fought back tears, reminiscing about their hard work. After the game, Brenda drove to a pizza restaurant where her team was celebrating. Parking was far from the venue, so she walked in. She saw Brian surrounded by Norma Wilson and Brandy Dorn, who seemed closer than usual. As Brenda approached, they moved back hastily. The sight reminded her of her recent conversation with Bill Grant. He had suggested they use their bed again since their last romp. The thought excited him, but she reminded him that he had promised not to make a move until he did it first. Now that Brian had been on night shifts and sleeping in the garage room, they hadn't even hugged or showed interest in each other for a while, which Bill found absurd. He argued that Brian was too young and Brenda was too attractive for him to lose interest. Is he straight or seeing another person? He's not gay, according to Brenda. He's quite masculine and faithful. He's just exhausted due to night shifts and only joins us for weekend dinners. He's occupied with yard work and other tasks. A typical guy married to someone as attractive as you wouldn't voluntarily neglect such a situation, even with long working hours, Bill suggested. He must be having affairs that should make it easier for us to meet him. However, Brian would never cheat on me, Brenda asserted strongly. He takes our marriage vows seriously and isn't the kind to sneak around for cheap flings. Is that what you're doing? Bill demanded. Well, not exactly. This is just a temporary situation, he reasoned, explaining that he's been busy with work and Tim's baseball games, leaving him less attentive towards me. I deserve some fun after managing the house, cooking meals, and holding down a full-time job, Brenda argued. Bill pondered her explanation, grinning subtly. You seem correct. Let's make the most of it. Could I have a day with you in my bed? The mention of Bill still made Brenda feel excited. She became worried as she saw 2 women flirting with Brian and leaving. It was evident that he had attracted some interested women. She realized her marriage required protection from those women's advances. Then she noticed Gertrude sitting alone. Brenda swiftly thought up a plan. With a warm smile, she sat next to Gertrude, who looked surprised. "It's wonderful to see you again, Gertrude," Brenda said. "Horace has turned into quite the athlete, and he's such a sweet boy. You must be proud of him." Gertrude admitted cautiously, "Tim is doing well too." Brian's association with them is proving beneficial, serving as an exceptional mentor for Horace. At times, Brian can be overly kind, providing an opportune moment to ask a favor. You may have observed the frequent presence of those blonde women around him. I was thinking perhaps you could lend me a hand. Under usual circumstances, Brian wouldn't stray, but he's a man, and these women seem to make aggressive advances towards him, as Brenda explained. "How do you think you could help me? Should I douse them with cold water when they get too close?" Gertrude joked. "My work and other obligations prevent me from attending most games and practices. However, I trust Brian with you. You're not his type at all. If you could simply be by his side when I'm absent, I would be truly grateful. I intend to advise Brian to stay near you and act more attentive. This might discourage those women if they perceive him as being involved with you." Brenda concluded. "You may find it uncomfortable, but it's for a vital matter preserving our marriage. There's an opportunity for you to assist. Could you stand in for Brian at sports events and practices? You see him as a safe option because I'm less flashy, not that I imply you're dull. I simply know Brian. He's less likely to be tempted by me than by some overtly attractive single mother or an ex-cheerleader. You propose this so he stays faithful, correct? Is infidelity something that cannot be forgiven in your view? While I understand that he may stray a bit, as long as he keeps me as his priority, would it be so terrible? However, you jest, right? Cheating is an absolute non-starter for me, adored husband. It breaches the marriage vows. I can't abide by unfaithfulness towards me. That would mark the end of our union. You're well aware of my stance on this, given our years together. Loyalty and faithfulness are important to me. It makes sense that dishonesty breaches the marriage contract. I concur with your viewpoint, Gertrude. By any chance, could you watch over Brian when I'm not present? Of course, Gertrude replied with a grin. Ensure you discuss everything with him. I'll contribute my share. Who else but an unassuming, simple woman would safeguard a faithful man better than you? Brenda expressed similar sentiments as what you stated, and she appreciated it. As she departed to reunite with her spouse, she mentioned this. Earlier in the night, we had a deep conversation before my departure for work. The essence of our discussion was that Brenda is worried about the numerous alluring single moms around me. She believes it would be wiser if I stay close to you, whom she affectionately refers to as Gertrude. However, this sentiment does not instill a sense of security within me. You are an intelligent man, and no one can ever truly be completely safe when in the company of a single woman, regardless of their physical attributes or aesthetics. With a wink, Gertrude playfully teased you as minx. In response, Brian expressed his sincere feelings, acknowledging that you are one of the most beautiful women he's ever encountered. You're more than just augmented abilities, you know. You're really giving me a run for my money. Gertrude, you're blushing. After the baseball season ends, I may have to suggest an eye exam for you. You have perfect vision, and I usually am accurate in judging people, but it seems I've misjudged my own wife, one big mistake I didn't foresee. Minx opined that perhaps they were underestimated. Joining in, she added this assumption was valid if they found her appealing. Brian found amusement as the single moms reacted. With Minx clinging close to him, they conversed and joked for a significant period. The mom appeared both surprised and let down, but it didn't take long for Minx to stand out. The group had a lengthy drive ahead to Middleburg for their following game, so they chose to depart a day early, intending to stay overnight at a hotel. This decision was made to keep the boys fresh for the match. Brian provided rides to Jake and Winston's parents as well as Minx. Their conversation revolved around the team's prospects, filled with enthusiasm upon arrival. They discovered themselves trailing behind the team bus. Brian assisted Ralph Winston with his luggage, while some parents like the Winstons volunteered to chaperone the boys and stayed at the same hotel. Others had to book accommodations elsewhere due to the bustling town hosting several games. Before Tim boarded the bus, Brian informed him of their different hotel and emphasized the importance of behaving for the coaches and chaperones. He then inquired about Minx's hotel location as they neared the team's lodging. She responded casually that it was the same one. Baffled, he asked how she found out. Minx didn't respond quickly. "How did you guess? We're at the same hotel. It's rather crowded this weekend, so finding a room might be difficult at short notice," Brian pointed out. Gertrude replied with a broad smile, leaving Brian bewildered for a few minutes. Later, Brian went to his hotel and suggested to Gertrude that she try to secure a room while he checked in, offering to wait around to help. "Thank you, but I'll be all right here," she assured him. After checking in and receiving his room keys, Brian returned to his truck to find Minx waiting. "Would you like a key to my room?" he asked, offering room 207. Minx was touched by the gesture, accepting the key and giving Brian a peck on the cheek. "It's time for bed. It's going to be a long night ahead." The following morning, Brian felt more exhausted than when he went to sleep initially. Brian found it difficult to keep his marriage vows, but Minx helped him see things differently. "Let's consider the situation carefully. Not only did Brenda cheat on you, but she has also cut you off completely. Even if she hadn't, her risky behavior puts your health at stake due to unprotected acts. In essence, being with her is no longer safe or appealing. She has effectively released you from your vows and the marriage contract. I have abstained for over 2 years now and have regular checkups to ensure my health. You got tested after discovering her infidelity and are clean as well. I have even started taking birth control a month ago with the hope that we could be together. Can you provide one solid reason why we shouldn't be together? Is it possible that you feel I am not attractive enough, or is it my appearance that your wife perceived to be a better fit compared to other women because she knew you wouldn't find me appealing? Minx, you are incredibly attractive. However, you seem to doubt your attractiveness. I've never wavered from my devotion to Brenda, but you've made a compelling argument for our union, and I wholeheartedly agree with you," Brian declared with a smile as we continue. "However, there's something important you should know. My parents are in hospice care and probably won't be with us much longer. My brother has been sending Horace's baseball tapes to his friend who's a coach at a top-level prep school. If he secures a scholarship next year, we might move back there. I value you greatly, but our relationship isn't long-term. It wouldn't work out under the circumstances. Consider my situation. You're an attractive married man with an unfaithful spouse, while I'm just an ordinary woman with a son who might excel in sports. I need to prioritize Horace's interests. You seemed pleased by the news about Scooter." Brian responded affirmatively, praising him as a wonderful kid and a talented player. His joy stems from the prospect of honing his skills against challenging opponents and acquiring quality education. Your influence is significant in attracting more attention towards him from better institutions. I've observed your dedication with him. It's ironic that you serving as a mentor to my son leads us to consider moving back to Leh, distancing ourselves from you. I'm not entirely convinced about my aptitude for brief, casual encounters like one-night stands," Brian confessed. "Perhaps it's wiser to avoid intimacy altogether than to engage in a fleeting affair and return to abstinence. You find my suggestion of moving back to La in 6 months for the school year amusing," Mink remarked. "That's quite some time away. Unless one is past his prime, there's plenty of opportunities for fun in 6 months, especially with a passionate woman. We'll have to wait and see about that. Are you ready to live up to your nickname, Minx?" Brian taunted. "I'll strive for you, big boy Minx, as promised. Just whistle, and I'll guide you on how to whistle a talent I'm said to excel at." Brian joked, "But you seem to be off the mark." Gertrude retorted. Eventually, the baseball team managed to win the state championship, securing Scooter a scholarship at a prestigious California prep school. Regrettably, both of Gertrude's parents passed away close to Thanksgiving. Brian and Tim attended their funerals where they got acquainted with Gertrude's brother, Dexter, instantly bonding with him. "This is my brother Dexter," Gertrude introduced him, adding that Brian had been a mentor for Horace and a good friend to us all. "Wow," Brian exclaimed in surprise. "Yes, that's right," Gertrude's brother confirmed. However, only Gertrude and their parents ever referred to him as Dexter. Everyone else knew him as Grim. "So, what do you call my sister?" he asked me. Brian refers to her as Minx, but he has an extended backstory. Brian humorlessly acknowledged. Grim chuckled. Over Thanksgiving, Brian stayed with Brenda and Tim at their parents' house for the first time in a while. He found himself preparing for bed alongside Brenda. They had always stayed overnight on Thanksgiving. Unable to think of a valid reason, Brian decided not to break tradition. Brenda hinted, "It's been ages since we've spent time together." "You seem to be in need of affection now," she added. Feeling a twinge of guilt, Brian responded, "So you're finally admitting you need some attention." "I knew it would happen eventually," he said, offering to satisfy her needs and put a smile on her face for the holiday. Brenda reacted sharply, "You callous jerk. With that attitude, there will be no intimacy for a long time." "What has come over you?" she asked. Brian briefly responded with a blunt refusal as he moved away from Brenda. It wasn't typical of him to be so abrupt. Despite this, he kept himself distant from her. Regret weighed heavily on him concerning the decline of their marriage. Insomnia took hold of Brenda following Brian's cold remark, making it difficult for her to sleep beside him. She wondered if his distance stemmed from their lack of intimacy or if he sensed her infidelity with Bill. Recognizing the need for an honest discussion with Bill, she felt compelled to avoid further denying Brian any closeness, especially after her careless comment about being with Bill in their marital bed, which could potentially arouse suspicion and damage their marriage. Brian adhered to a fixed routine during his night shifts. In the mornings, he'd return home, have a quick bite, then rest until 9 a.m. Sometimes he'd wake up at 2 p.m. only to find Minx in bed with him. They'd spend an hour together before she left for home, waiting for Scooter back from school. With baseball season over, Brian could relax and be prepared when Tim returned. Typically, he'd take a short nap afterward before heading off to work. Generally, this routine worked well for both Brian and Minx. One evening in early December, Tim called Brian shortly after starting his shift at work. "Dad, Scooter and I are with Heather and Holly in Heather's car," he said. "You said we could stay out until midnight since there's no school tomorrow. We've hit a snag. Heather's mom's car has a flat tire, and there's no spare in the trunk. We're stuck on D Street, and I'm getting worried." A few men were by the arcade, looking over in their direction. "Stranded on D Street by the arcade," Brian cursed. Discussion postponed for later. "Is Heather operating the 2017 Corolla?" "Affirmative." Tim responded promptly, promising to bring a compatible wheel and tire and head over. "Keep your doors locked. Call the police if you face trouble." "Take care of those girls." Brian put his phone away and moved towards the production floor. He noticed Gus driving a Corolla as well. "Still using that Corolla, Gus?" asked Brian, addressing the bearded man operating a forklift. He needed a tire fitting his car immediately. While conversing with Gus, Brian spotted Jack Reynolds passing by. Jack was Holly's uncle, and his sister was Holly's mother. "Jack," said Brian, "your son and some friends are stranded on D Street due to a flat tire and lacking a spare. Holly is with them. I'm grabbing a tire from Gus and heading over. Could you accompany us? You have a proper spare, not one of those flimsy donuts." Gus agreed resolutely, deciding they would travel in his car to reach the location swiftly. They were concerned about the kids being in that neighborhood at night. In an unsafe locale, particularly for teenage girls like Brenda, she lay in bed, feeling the afterglow from her time with Bill. His phone rang, and he saw it was Heather calling. "Darn it, it's Heather. I need to pick this up, or she won't stop pestering me," Bill said, checking the caller ID. Brenda could only hear Bill's end of the conversation, but was intrigued by what she overheard. "Why are you down there? That's unfortunate. Those boys should be able to handle a minor issue like that. Call AAA. It's not my fault. Your mom doesn't have a spare tire." "What was that about?" Brenda inquired once Bill ended the call. "Nothing to worry about," Bill replied, reaching over to touch Brenda's chest. "Heather had a flat tire, but she's getting help from AAA as Brian and his buddies pulled up behind Heather's car." Nearby, some rough-looking individuals were noticed by Brian. He exited, grabbed tools from Gus's trunk, and Gus brought a spare tire. Jack gestured for Heather to lower her window. "Stay put till we fix the tire," he said. "If these thugs cause any trouble, we'll deal with it." Holly needed an explanation for being on D Street, according to Jack. Brian positioned the jack under the flat tire, tightened it, then moved to loosen the lug nuts. The leader of the rough guys approached Jack, claiming it was their territory before Brian could respond. He hit the guy with a tire iron on his shins, causing him to drop to his knees and curse, while Brian sat on him and continued loosening the nuts. The two nearest gang members advanced, appearing ready to help their fallen leader. Jack quickly struck the first one in the head, knocking him down instantly. Gus moved forward, causing the second one to retreat out of his reach. Raising the car a bit, Brian told Jack to remove the flat tire. After tightening all the nuts, Jack lowered the car. They ignored the insults and curses from the rough guys as they worked. After 2 tries, the guy under Brian decided to stay put, and Brian removed the lug nuts and took off the flat tire. Gus handed him a good tire, which he replaced after hand tightening all the nuts. Jack lowered the car again. The rough guys scattered when Brian approached them, shouting at them to leave and warning them not to run over the fallen men in the street or stay away from that area. The 3 men got back into Gus's car and followed Heather's car towards the kids' neighborhood. Gus chuckled, saying he couldn't believe Brian had hit that fool in the shins. "You went down like a ton of bricks," Jack said, thanking Gus for coming along. "My hand hurts, but it felt good to knock that punk on the head." Gus laughed, saying it was fun to watch. By morning, everyone at the plant had heard the story. Stories of bravery and excitement always went down well, especially during the night shift as they helped pass the time and distract people from their tiredness. The following afternoon, Brian woke up to Minx jumping into bed and kissing him passionately. "Last night, she was naked, and aroused Horace informed me about the incident. You were fantastic. You really are. Thank you for taking care of the children like that," the flirt commented. "You have something special coming up. I could have come earlier, but I had to wait for Horace and Tim to leave since they didn't have school today." Meanwhile, Brenda was beginning her shift when Sue Blaine approached her by the water cooler, looking like she wanted to talk. It turns out Brian Jack Reynolds and Gus Benson dealt with some troublemakers near a child's car on D Street last night. "A good swing with a tire iron seems to handle those punks quite quickly," Sue said. Brenda seemed to understand the situation right away since Heather had contacted her father for assistance. However, it appears that things were more serious than Bill let on, and considering kids were involved, it's likely that Holly, Horace, and Tim were caught up in it too. I'm curious about what Brenda stated after hearing her response, as I want to verify if the rumors are accurate, since Sue recounted them. Brenda felt aggravated with Bill, though she didn't display it openly, because his daughter had contacted him in a perilous situation and he neglected her. Brian, Gus, and Jack Holly's uncle acted bravely, behaving like true men by safeguarding the children from harm. This revelation deeply saddened Brenda, as she couldn't understand why she got involved with such a self-centered individual. Bill's character was far superior to Brian's by tenfold, which made her question her own judgment. In the break room that afternoon, Brenda found Bill eating alone while his delivery truck was being repaired. She didn't mince words, telling him, "Heather reached out for your help last night, and you dismissed her. Those children could have been in real danger, and all you did was suggest they call AAA. What kind of father does that? Everything turned out okay. Bill said it carelessly. Your husband and his friends handled it. So, what's the problem here? Brian acted as if you had abandoned your own daughter, which is the issue. My son was with them. If your husband is so great, why am I the one growing closer to you while he's been out of luck for months?" Bill just laughed without a care. "He can't compete with me. He's no match." "Being a man isn't about size," Brenda countered. "He's more of a man than you'll ever be." "You say that, but last night I surpassed that weakling in every way that matters," responded Bill, casually taking another sip of his soda. "That was it." Brenda spoke decisively. "We're done. Don't even try to talk to me again." I want nothing to do with you. Whatever, replied Bill indifferently. There are plenty of married women out there who would love a man like me. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. If you politely request it, I'd still be open to intimacy with you. However, Brenda wept and swiftly left the room upon being asked. She had been unfaithful to her husband, dishonoring him and risking her marriage and family for a selfish individual. All she could hope was that Brian would never discover her folly. With this revelation, she knew she owed many apologies. Minx had just brought Brian to climax when she heard sobs behind her. Startled, Minx turned to see Brenda weeping, tears flowing down her face. "How could you do this to me?" she wailed. "I put my trust in both of you, and now this." Minx responded calmly, pulling on her clothes after silencing Brian with a gesture. "You asked me to keep those busty blondes away from Brian, didn't you? I gave up for your aspirations, a fact you were aware of, as you knew I wouldn't approve of you being with him." Brenda retorted, her tears transforming into rage. "I can hardly fathom Brian would cheat on me, especially with a skinny woman. You find it hard to accept that Brian and I share intimacy, but there's no need for such rudeness. I'm merely helping him alleviate stress. He's been feeling overwhelmed, you see. Brian felt the pressure of not being close to you, so he sought solace elsewhere. Fortunately, I was available at the opportune moment. You should be thankful. I've aided you in cutting ties with Brian completely and keeping Bill content. As for Bill, where is he? Is he with you right now? You are aware of Bill, aren't you? Brenda exclaimed. Well, yes, Minx replied. I believe it's common knowledge about Bill. For several months, you've been seeing him. He vowed to be with you intimately every time you slept with Brian, which led to a distance between you and your husband. Fortunately, Bill stepped in, as intended. If Brian was aware of the situation, he didn't express it. Why didn't he speak up? Why did he allow things to continue for so long? Brenda questioned, her tears still streaming down her face. Typically, men react fiercely when they discover their wife is cheating. He'd probably get angry and yell at me before divorcing me, Brenda explained as she faced the bitter truth. That seems accurate. So, what happens next? Will Brian and Tim remain while you move in with Bill? Minx inquired calmly. I won't be leaving my home. If Tim stays with me, it's up to Brian to leave. He'd be the one to pay alimony and child support, Brenda asserted decisively. Essentially, as Brian had anticipated, things unfolded this way. He desired to be near Tim and excel as the best father possible. How could he achieve this? Minx inquired without suggesting they part ways. Brenda hinted, Brian remained with Tim, not me, upon learning about Bill and me. Mentally, Brian detached from our marriage. Haven't we been living like divorced for a long time? You were merely unable to observe it due to Bill obscuring your view. By the time I arrived on the scene, you had already emotionally abandoned your husband. I assisted Brian in healing, Minx clarified, after breaking things off with Bill. She pledged never to encounter him again. Correct, Brenda confirmed. He abandoned his daughter last night, didn't he? Minx commented, even cheaters have their boundaries. Are you and Brian cohabiting now? Brenda inquired, wiping away her tears. We're content with things as they are at the moment. Oris and I are heading back to Leh before school starts. I'd prefer for him not to discover his mom is dating his best friend's father if possible, she added. If it comes time for me to depart, I may assist Brian in finding a new partner if he desires, Minx disclosed. You didn't snatch my man like those other mothers intended, Minx stated. We're merely spending time together for now, similar to you and that scoundrel. If I were to halt this, she asked, wouldn't it be best? He's my husband. You can't sleep with him, Brenda objected. That right was granted when you began seeing Bill Grant, Minx countered, effectively releasing Brian from any responsibilities towards you. We're committed to one another. Trustingly, it appears that Brian has been informed he cannot be with you or anyone else if he wishes to be with Minx. This prompts the question of who else Bill Grant may have been with and any potential diseases he might carry. As Minx stated, there could be various unsavory elements present. Brenda lamented over these words, considering the possibility that Bill had been unfaithful. With this in mind, Brenda recognized Bill's character more clearly and felt the need for a medical test soon. With a hint of anxiety, Brenda asked, "What now?" Minx suggested maintaining the current situation. She would continue visiting Brian while you avoided him. This arrangement seemed acceptable, as, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," was the response given. However, Brenda firmly stated she wouldn't stick to this plan, as she was leaving soon and intended to demonstrate to Brian what a wonderful wife she could be. Minx countered by stating that although Bill knew Brenda was faithful, she was making herself available to others. Minx asserted that she controlled at least the aspect of Brian's life involving both of them, ensuring he would not become entangled in your affairs while with her. "I won't jeopardize health, and he's uninterested as well. One lesson learned too late is that a relationship involves more than just physical intimacy." This is what Brenda stated, feigning assurance. "Sex devoid of love or commitment is quite degrading," she continued. "I will fulfill the duties of a wife towards her husband while you merely provide him with sex. Ponder on that. Here's our agreement. You cook for him, clean the house, and do his laundry. I'll take care of him in bed. We'll find out who's happier, Brian." Brenda expressed remorse for disrespecting you. "Can you forgive me?" she begged. "How can he trust you again?" Minx pointed out. "At some point, he may forgive you, but regaining his trust is another matter entirely." Minx advised Brian, "Enjoy the upcoming months as his wife, for you'll only have 9 months after she leaves to try rekindling their relationship once Tim graduates. Realize what you've lost for a stranger and learn from it. Brian isn't keen on breaking up the family while Tim is in school, but may discard you when he graduates." You question why Minx speaks for Brian. She clarified that she is not just his lover, she's his best friend. Previously, they had private conversations with Brian when you were with Bill. He assured her he would address the situation and reward her when the time came. "Can you please give us some privacy now?"